Welcome back to our learning session on bears. This is Vicki with Learning Home Volunteers. Well, how did your bread turn out? My family loved the bread. We used it as toast for sandwiches. With our pasta dinner, it was certainly gobbled up. Cooking is a very powerful activity for children. The cooking is fun, and the result is something that can be appreciated and shared with the whole family. Well, this week we're going to paint, rescue some bears out of ice, and do a little movement game, and I'm kind of excited to get started. This is activity number 10, ice painting. Ice painting can be done in a number of different ways, so let's take a look at a couple different approaches. The first approach is to actually use an ice cube tray, mix the water and paint into the cubes, and then add sticks in and then let it freeze. Each of these cubes will become a paint popsicle, and the child uses the popsicle sticks to actually paint on the paper. Our next approach starts with ice cubes too. We basically empty an ice cubes into a container and then provide brushes and paint, and the child paints the actual ice. We could work with a block of ice too. You could make a block of ice by putting water in a takeout container, freeze it, and then release the block onto a plate and put the ice block in front of the child for them to paint. Watercolors are a really great choice, but our washable paint works too. Want to go big? Well, you could put the ice cubes in a really big container, add splashes of paints in spots, and unlike our other choice, we could squirt water on the ice, and then the paint, water, and will actually all mix together to make beauty. You want a more passive art project? No problem, we got you covered. We can put the cubes that are filled with color on a piece of paper and then let them melt onto the paper. The interesting thing with this is how the colors all mix together, which I think is really delightful. Well, here's a different twist. You could use a block of ice, paint, and salt. Ice and salt have a unique relationship. Salt makes the ice melt faster. So when you add salt to ice that's already been painted, it gives the way for the paint to actually enter the ice block itself. So neat, you get something that is another approach and causes the paint to actually come into the ice itself, which I think is really fun. Well, our next activity number 11, while you're making ice for your previous activity, I suggest you add some of the little plastic bears into a cupcake tray, fill them with water, and then freeze them. That'll cause the little bears to be trapped in ice, which is perfect for our learners to rescue them from their frozen trap. You could even set up the anticipation for your child by having them prepare the trap, and they'll place the animals in the cupcake holders and then pour water over them. This kind of gets them involved in the whole idea that water turns into ice, which I think is really interesting. Now comes the rescue part. I normally provide a little bit of salt, some cold water, some warm water to help with the escape, and maybe even something to pound with so that they can break up the ice. You can spray or squirt or even chip away at the ice. I can't wait to see what magic happens for your learners. This is activity number 12, exploring buttons. You will find the cardboard strips with colors, numbers, and shapes on them, and a bag of button shapes. This activity is a shape counting and color recognition activity. Let's look at some ideas for playing with the buttons. You can put the cardboard strip down on the floor and review the names of the shapes by touching each of the shapes on the strip and calling it out. You want to ask the child to line up the buttons under the shapes like we're seeing here, matching the shape above it. Or you could use the color strip and they can have them sort their buttons by color. I see one sky blue button, one purple button, one orange button, two yellow buttons, and one green one. We have 0 buttons for blue, pink, red, brown, and black and white. And I think 0 is a really great concept to point out to your child. In this slide, we see a number strip, and below each of the print numbers, we can make the correct number brackets to make that number. So under the print number 1, we see a single button. Under the print number 2, we see 2 buttons. There are lots of other fun things to do with the buttons themselves. You can stack them on top of each other and see who can make this tallest stack. You could mix the buttons with Play-Doh and create a button sculpture. You could even use a piece of spaghetti and thread the buttons on the spaghetti in your Play-Doh. Each of these activities are marvelous fine motor skills and help build the hands muscles so that they're actually ready for writing. You could also use the pipe cleaners and thread the buttons onto the pipe cleaners. As a second example, you might even make a bracelet by threading up and down through the holes in the pipe cleaner. So what else are you going to do with your buttons? We'd love to see your ideas, so please post them on ClassTag. Our last activity for this session, activity number 13, is a hopking game. You'll find in your box paper buttons. You can use these buttons to create a button hop game. You want to spread the paper buttons on the floor, and then using your color cards, you can ask the child to jump from one color to the other. Well, this has been a fun week. Next session is about Play-Doh, and I'll see you then.